But then we're going to listen to a philosophy teacher, have his own perspective on this. These are the people who have the mind that is wise, to level up this conversation on what logic is and how we can interpret it in our society. That is Mr. Zephyrinus GHONG NDUM. He's the original pedagogic inspector of philosophy and logic for the Central region. He's in conversation with Valencia GWEFUNI, who put together this package so we can better understand why World Logic Day is marked.
Logic originated from its Greek word logos, a study of the law of thought. A clear and precise explanation of the meaning of concept is celebrated every January 14th.
You know, a human being having reason as the property of its very nature makes it possible for humans to be able to reason, to make connections of ideas in view of making creative productions. So logic is a bundle of principles, laws that permit one to reason correctly and to be able to distinguish correct from incorrect reasoning. The initiator, as history holds, is often called the father of logic, Aristotle. Yeah, Aristotle, you know, every human being by nature is rational. But Aristotle discovered that principles are which must be developed to improve on the ability of human reasoning. So that's why he got engaged in bringing to birth logic, and he called logic an organon, which means a tool or an instrument to acquire knowledge in whatever domain in life.
Logic provides a fundamental or guiding principles which serve as a channel to improve the thinking capacity of people.
Logic truly, like you say, is a branch of philosophy. And logic is central in all domains of life, especially philosophy, which in itself deals with critical thinking. To philosophy, logic, I'll take about two aspects. If we look at types of reasoning, logic proceeds either by inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning. Those are the main types of reasoning. Then we may add to it a third one, analogical reasoning, or even reasoning by the absurd. Now, but we take these two simple ones. Deductive reasoning is when we reason from established principles, from general situations to particular cases. We go from principles that have been established, which are universal, which help us to discover the unknown or particular issues. The human being always seeks ways of explaining phenomena, explaining reality. So the inductive form of reasoning permits to establish principles which now help us to be able to analyze particular new cases that we come across, because the universe is so vast that we can't discover everything about it, and that's the whole goal of science.
As a life wire of human existence, logic helps man to be consciously rational.
Definition is a core element in the study of logic. You get it? That's why logicians, beginning from Aristotle, have worked on the very concept of definition, which permits us to be able to define definition, to give the meaning of meaning. If you cannot define that which permits us to know the meaning of what is, how will we be able to do that? So you will see that to define man, we must be able to distinguish the concept man, which is an animal, which depicts an animal, from all other aspects placed under this concept of animal. So we say man is a rational being. Everything that the human being discovers, be it in science or whatever, it is based on what nature has provided. If you see the train, it takes the form of a snake when it's moving along the rail. The plane is the form of birds. Aristotle, based on what God has already implanted in man, if I may go theological, what God or nature had already imputed in man. If you go through the Judeo-Christian perspective of the origin of the universe or man, you will see that God formed man and did what? Breathe into man. And that breath is the life, is the rational principle that God put in man. Okay, and that's why we are responsible beings. And we remain in that same Judeo-Christian perspective. You realize that we are liable to going either to paradise or going to hell. Why? Because we have this rational capability that permits us to distinguish the right from the wrong, good from evil, and all of that. So, by nature, man is rational. But when you study logic, you become consciously rational. And that we may call meta-knowledge. If you know that you know what you know, and you know how to know. That's now beyond just knowing. Like I would say, they say, what is this? I say it's a pen. I know a pen. But what does it mean to know a thing? You're now going beyond.
Have you ever found yourself torn between following your guts or analyzing the facts? Why our emotions drive our decisions, logic shape our choices.
To be able to argue correctly, you need passion. But it becomes a problem when logic and its principles are put aside totally just to lean on emotions. For example, somebody by some, I don't know what happens, assassinates or kills the parents. Maybe somebody commits fratricide, maybe because he wants to inherit property. If he knew being an orphan is detrimental to his life, he wouldn't have killed the parents. If the parents were more important than the property he wanted to get by force, he wouldn't have killed the parents. So, in such a case, the judge will just rule the sanction he had to give.
Being more than just an academic subject, logic provides the opportunity to manage complex information, avoiding fallacies, making objective and well thought out decisions.
Lovely report, Valencia GWEFUNI, and big thanks to Mr. Zephyrinus for facilitating our understanding of what logic is and how it's applied in society. Because sometimes people, when you don't understand something, it's far away from you. Immediately you understand it, it's closer, and it's easier to apply. Logic helps make sense of things, solve problems, make good decisions, understand others, and just be more structured in your approach to reasoning. For example, if there is a problem, you have to identify the problem, you have to assess the options, and then you choose the best option. A quick example is, if the problem is you want to eat puff-puff, and you have no sugar to make your puff-puff. That's you identifying the reason why you cannot make your puff-puff, you don't have sugar. So logic will help you assess the options. So what do I do now that I have no sugar to make puff-puff? Should I buy sugar from the market? Should I borrow from my neighbor? Should I make puff-puff without sugar? And then you look at the best option that works for you. And if you are not too greedy, you may not just have puff-puff today. Get time to buy sugar to make the puff-puff instead of going to beg from your neighbor, because you must eat it right now. So there goes you weighing those options, and that makes you a logical thinker. Hopefully, by the end of this program, we would understand logic a lot better.